Okay. Can y'all hear me with no mics? Yes. Small room. Okay. We are going to go ahead and get started on our digital humanities presentation. So, like Dr. Hofer said, we started kind of from scratch, knowing what book we wanted to use and knowing the standards by which the public school is beholden. So from there, we had a lot of creativity to kind of come up with supplementary resources to support the traditional curriculum. So we wanted to do a virtual field trip, and I knew I couldn't do that solo, so it was a team effort. So just to give you an idea of the project goals that we were going off of, we wanted to increase the capacity that students and educators had to achieve to the standards of excellence, and to use reading, writing, speaking, and that should say listening concurrently as integrated processes with a theoretical and research framework. So we wanted to make sure that what we were doing was actually supported by the current research and the science of reading, which is the kind of shift that has recently come in Georgia, and that they're trying to align more to that kind of specific way of teaching reading. We wanted to increase student confidence in just evaluating the context in which they were going to be communicating and thinking about things like audience and just boosting their confidence in their own skills, and to engage students and to use, of course, all the scaffolding that would make sure the students are met where they are and that they have the appropriate resources to accomplish the goals of the class. And this is all about literacy, so we wanted to come at literacy from all sides and make sure that the text that they had access to was a high quality text. And so we know that the University of Georgia Press put the Flannery O'Connor, A Girl Who Knew Her Own Mind, through a really rigorous review process. And we really appreciated that it was a biography scaled for middle grades readers rather than the kind of more heavy and very large biographies of Flannery O'Connor that you find geared towards adults. So the grant started in 2022. I came on in November as a project coordinator, and we started the curriculum building with the Baldwin County Schools team. And I am a literature and archives person, so my job was mainly to look for resources, to try to pull together things that were O'Connor related, but also appropriate for 5th grade. And if you've read her fiction, you know that that is a challenge because she does have a lot of violence and strong language in her work. So we found things that were tangentially related. They do not read O'Connor actually in this unit. Then we had our test run of the curriculum in the 4th 9 weeks with Baldwin County Schools 5th grade, and they did field trips to Andalusia Farm as well as to Georgia College as part of that, and they did podcasting in their schools as well. After the test run, we did focus groups to get some feedback on what was working, what needed improvement, and to kind of try to gauge a little bit of our goals and see how successful we were in boosting their confidence and improving the teacher's capacity. And then from after that, we started revising the workshop. We started, the unit, and making sure that the feedback was implemented and that the texts were updated from some of the former texts that had not fared so well in the focus group feedback. And then in the fall of 2023, we started doing community workshops where we actually branched out and partnered with community organizations to do creative writing and podcasting workshops with students outside of the formal school setting, but still reinforcing those literacy skills that they're getting in the day-to-day instruction. So why make a virtual field trip? Andalusia's right here. Why bother? Andalusia's not ADA accessible, and there's always the risk that someone is not able to go on a field trip or doesn't have permission from their parents. And we wanted to make this virtual field trip a companion to the main text that it was used. So it supplements the book Flannery O'Connor, A Girl Who Knew Her Own Mind, which is the middle grade's biography of O'Connor, and it follows her throughout her life in all the cities that she's lived in. So we decided to use Google Lit Trips as kind of the container for the virtual field trip, and it allows, it's modeled on the literary field trip Bud Not Buddy that's currently in use in Baldwin County Schools 5th grade. So virtual field trips, anyone can make a Google field trip. You don't have to have really specialized equipment or skills. The best things to adapt are books or topics that include a lot of locations, because it is anchored by Google Maps, so you're able to bounce around on the map. And visual assets, so some kind of photos, videos, some kind of media that will lay on top of the map, and we'll show you what this looks like. So to make a Google Earth field trip, you just need a Google account and a computer and whatever visual elements you want to upload into it, and then your text that explains and contextualizes the field trip. So it starts out with a kind of landing page, with like a landing page, and then we'll click to the next. So then as you select your locations, you can kind of add materials into the, where's the mouse? I lost it. I can click on this. Oh, yes, I did that. Beautiful. So you can insert the kind of pop out with whatever photographs you would like to use. I love to get historical photographs and archival material, just for exposure for students to learn about the fact that there is a such thing as archives. And it's a really cool comparison to the kind of current Google Maps photos that can be captured. So of course we have GSCW, as this was once called, where Flannery went to college. And we follow her all the way up to graduate school at the University of Iowa. And then we go to Dotto, where she spent some time in a writer's residency. And then, of course, she did come back home. We skipped over Connecticut. It wasn't a big part of the book, and there was no archival footage of her time living in Connecticut. But she did live in Connecticut as well. And of course, we know she came home and lived in Andalusia for the last about 14 years of her life, and is ultimately buried at Memory Hill Cemetery. So this tool is interactive. You can go to Street View and kind of walk along the streets using Google Maps, and you can, I'm expand the text box, if you can see. Each one of these text boxes has photos, but then it also has some videos. We'll show you one of those.
On August 3, 1964, Mary Flannery O'Connor died at the age of 39. Mary Flannery O'Connor was buried here at Memory Hill Cemetery. She passed away after a surgery related to her lupus. Though she was diagnosed almost 15 years earlier, no one expected her to die so young.
She lies buried here, next to her father, in the red clay earth of the Georgia she had come to cherish.
I've been writing 18 years, and I've reached the point where I can't do again what I know I can do.
In the decades since O'Connor's death, countless writers and artists have been inspired by her life and work, both the literary and visual. One can find countless work by browsing issues of the Flannery O'Connor Review and O'Connor Society Bulletin. O'Connor's influence remains evident in literature, music, and art around the world.
So underneath the media, there's room for text. So we've added some biographical information and then citations for where all of the archival materials were pulled from. But it really lets students kind of interact with the elements that are most interesting to them, and also gives them a lot more context with the little pop-outs. So that's where the field trip ends. It's fairly short, but it took us a few months to do. So don't be fooled by its simplicity. So to access historical materials, I recommend folks check with the Library of Congress. That is a massive database. It has photos, videos, documents, postcards, newspapers, and all of that is available free for online, and it's okay to use for educational purposes. So you wouldn't run into any kind of copyright issue. The Digital Library of Georgia is similar. It's all Georgia focused, but you can sort by location, time period, type, topic. So it's really a haven of accessible and copyright-free things to use for education. And then the archives of GCSU gracefully allow us to scan some of the items that they retain copyright over related to Flannery O'Connor. So we have some photos from our own archives. And wherever you are, if this is something you're interested in doing, talk to your local librarian, talk to your local archivist. They may have connections with the Historical Society. They may have their own collections that you could use. And always, be sure that if you pull stuff from somewhere else, you know that it's okay to use with copyright, because no one wants to have any kind of issues with that. So some of the things we observed when we were podcasting, Lily and I did run the podcasting days for Lakeview Academy, which was getting a couple hundred fifth graders wrangled and getting their podcasts recorded. So some of the really exciting things that we noticed were that as the students read their piece and then listened to it, they were self-editing. They were revising their own work based on what they heard. And it was really a self-guided process. It didn't require a lot of teacher-led feedback. So because they were reading their script, listening to it, and speaking it out loud, we felt like there was a really good kind of reinforcement of the literacy skills they had been working on. And there was a really active engagement with storytelling because they were recording it and they had to rely on their words to get the point across and not video or photo, as is so common these days. They were thinking about their tone of voice, their audience, the context, and the character descriptions and point of view. Point of view was a huge topic that we talked a lot about because it would be really confusing in a podcast if the point of view suddenly changed. So it was nice to see that kind of aha moment with some of the students and the great teamwork that they showed by kind of dividing up the task according to their strengths. Some students were really strong writers, some were strong speakers, some were sound effects gurus. There was one girl who was making sound effects with her hands and her mouth and pieces of paper lying about. And I said, this is a future sound engineer right here. And then there was scaffolding to meet the student needs. The podcast assignment was really flexible for the students, and we encouraged every teacher to do it as long as they wanted to. And so the PEC or support classes were able to be included, and with just a little bit more support on getting their podcast recorded and getting their script together. And so a teacher thanked us for making sure that they were included and that they had a chance to do the super cool, shiny thing that they perhaps would typically not be a part of. And then the kind of expanded definition of storytelling, kind of showing the students that you don't have to tell a story just by writing it down. You can speak it aloud. You can, they wanted to know, could we do YouTube? Can we make YouTube videos? I said, you can. We're not going to right now, but that's another way to tell stories. So that got them really excited, especially the students who were allowed and encouraged to take creative liberties with their topic and to choose a topic that interested them. I learned about the history of soccer. I learned about the students' opinions on whether or not there should be dress codes in school. That was a very passionate debate. And then plenty of stories, some of them more disturbing than others. And, you know, some of them were just stories that they had been told by their family that they wanted to share. So just the variety of topics allows students to kind of get invested and to feel like they could actually tell a story of their own. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Lily to give us some tips on how to do this, if this is something that you want to do in your school or bring to even a community group or a different organization.
When implementing podcasting into the classroom, one of the big things that, as just as Alia explained, was the fact that leave room for creativity, because the creativity that these kids were able to, the stories that they came up with, all of the best podcast episodes that we had came when they had the freedom to decide. One group actually did a whole history of kind of group talking to their own family members and community members as well. And I was very surprised by that interview. Like they had to think of like interesting questions to try and like talk to the parents and actually pull the story out of them. So it was just another way of thinking about, you know, storytelling. And then the next bit that I would say is get good audio from the beginning. You don't have to be an audio engineer to, you know, film in a quiet location. One of the biggest points of things that can help with that is filming in smaller groups. For this grant, we did very large classrooms at a time, and kids have a lot of energy, especially when you put them all in one room together. So filming in like a smaller room with smaller groups, maybe 10 to 12, works really well. And again, the self-revision process was very interesting because we did it in groups of 3. People would step up to the mic and record the podcast, while the rest of the group actually would look at, you know, the actual scripts, what they've written, and would start writing out down ideas, because it's interesting how creativity can pop up at the very last minute. And then the next thing that I would highly advise if you are planning to do this in your classroom is to have a filing system. Like a lot of these kids will, first time podcasting, you know, you're not going to get it absolutely perfect the first time. So that means that there's going to be a lot of files. You definitely want to make note of the ones that are at like, you know, the final product. And also just to make sure you don't get confused with, you know, another kid's podcast for another groups. And making sure that you have SD cards. That's a very small thing, but it's very easy to forget. So finally, editing the podcast. At the end of the day, it's nice to have a fully polished, you know, podcast. But the nice thing about the units that we're giving away today is that you can edit within the podcasting units themselves. But if not, there's also Audacity, which is a free software for everybody, very easily accessible. And then obviously, one of the best things about the podcast and like making one is actually getting to see it. So you want to make sure that the students, like, it's accessible in some way. And usually YouTube or Spotify, of course with parents' permission, is very accessible to all of the kids, and yeah, it's very easily like accessible. And then we actually do have one example of one of the podcasts that came from one of our workshops.
Hello, my name is Brianna Brown. Today I'm here with Create to discuss my blackout poetry about the universe. The universe was once a beautiful and wonderful. Something about the color, texture, and form were like one great storm. You'll find a magnificent glimpse above with a soaring view of a shimmering waterfall. Unmatched beauty and its inspiration. Now our national heritage is at stake.
And finally, once again, one last tip would be always make sure that if you are publishing it to YouTube or Spotify copyright is something that you do need to be aware of. So Mary, one of the things that the kids loved most about making these podcasts was sound effects, and it also, like, again, another thing that just really helped their creativity. So a great place to get those sound effects would be YouTube Audio Library for Creators, and which is, again, accessible to everybody. You just need to have a Google account. And then if you happen to have access to a Mac, iMovies also has a sound library, and you just, again, have to have a Mac for that.
And if I focus just. I just wanted to share a little bit of the focus group feedback with y'all so you can see some of what the kids were saying. We asked them how did they feel before podcasting, and there was some excitement. There were a lot of kids who said they were nervous. One, was excited because she's like, well, I've been writing so hard all these past few weeks. I want people to hear what I've been writing. And there were a few that were scared, and some that just said what their neighbors said. So you always have to deal with that in the focus group. And then we asked how did they feel after podcasting. And a lot of the kids who had been nervous said they felt good, that they were pleasantly surprised. One said, I felt great because I didn't have to do it anymore, it was over. That's totally fine. But a lot of them said, when can we do it again? I feel comfortable, now I want to do it again, I want to talk about something else, I have a new story, a new idea. Or one said, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to become a YouTuber. And said, well, now you know a little bit about how to do it. So that was exciting to get to hear from the kids and to have them asking, when can we do this again? That was affirming in the fact that it had been both educational and enjoyable for them. So if you want to go in more depth on this topic and get a more hands-on workshop about podcasting or the virtual field trip, please reach out to us, contact us. We're happy to share what we did and guide you through creating that and just some of the hiccups that we found as we were creating it. So just let me know or send us an email after this if you want to incorporate that in your class.